Oh, we have Kelly just came on. Hi, Kelly.
Good morning.
So good morning, everyone. Just a quick housekeeping note. If you are not speaking, please keep yourself on mute. And if you don't know how to do that, I'll go ahead and mute you. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. And we've got a couple of different ways that you can interact with us. We're really eager to hear your ideas. And I'm just looking for the present. So, okay, so we're off. Welcome to Design Playgrounds for Learning and Leveraging Failure to Succeed. This is part of our work at National College of Education at National Louis University. Here are different ways in which to share your ideas. You can go onto the Padlet. You can go to something called an answer garden, and we'll be taking a look at that later. You just type in your questions. I'll be checking that as we go through the presentation. And here's the presentation. We will send out the presentation to folks that have registered later, so you'll have that. So, session overview, we're going to introduce ourselves in a second. We're going to talk about some big ideas from the learning sciences and how that intersects with our topic today of designing instruction for using failure. We're going to share with you our ideas and ask for yours on 7 different types of failure, which we think is a new way to look at that, and how to frame failure. And then we're going to give you an opportunity to apply these ideas to an activity. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Dr. Angela Elcordy. I am Assistant Professor of Learning Sciences here at the National College of Education at National Louis. This is my 6th year here at National Louis, so happy to be here with you all.
Yes, good morning. I'm Dr. Ann Kenneman. I'm a professor and department chair of the early childhood programs here at National College of Education at National Louis, and I'm very happy to be joining everyone. I've worked with Dr. Elcordy and Dr. DePinto on many different initiatives around the learning sciences and around STEAM and STEM. So looking forward to our work together and presentation.
And I'm Dr. Vito DePinto, Associate Professor. I am the senior member in more ways than one of our wonderful presentation group. This is my 33rd year. Currently, I am full-time in the secondary, our MHE in secondary ed, and I still am known as the science guy.
Yes. So we wanted to get an idea of who's here, right? So we broke it up into the grade spans: early childhood, elementary, middle, high school, and other. And Dr. Elcordy, we want them to just, do we want to put it in the chat? Or
let's pop it in the chat. We just want to know who you are so that we can kind of customize our discussion to you, okay?
Yes.
Secondary.
So take a moment, right? Take a moment. Yes, that would be great.
Special education, high school, and other, elementary, MAT.
Instructional coach.
Got a variety of folks here.
We do. So it looks as if, right, Dr. Elcordy, we're pretty well represented over grade spans. And what's really interesting is to see how many K-12 specialists there are, right?
Mm-hmm.
across the grade spans. That's quite interesting to us. Coaches from Doug. Hi, Doug.
Hi, Doug. Okay, so super. Thanks for sharing with us. We're going to move along now, and so we have a variety of folks with us, and we hope this will be useful to you. Okay, here's just an example of, here's our answer garden. So what you would do here is just type in the questions that you have, and I'll be checking that as well as the chat. And that way we can continue the conversation even beyond our presentation here. So our colleagues at the National College of Education were thinking about how to integrate the sciences of learning into our practice. And we realized that we already implement that, and there's probably this true for you as well, that you implement findings or takeaways from the science of learning in your daily practice, but you may use different language. So it's a very complex topic, but we've chosen to kind of put it into three big buckets for you in terms of learner variability, so how learners vary and why that matters. Two, cognition and learning, so how learning actually happens and the context and the factors that help that along. And considering teaching as a design science. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we go into designing instruction with the idea that we're going to evaluate how it went and then tweak it for the next time around. And as educators, most of us do that naturally, but by making it more of a systematic process, you can look for evidence of your results and incorporate that into your evaluation and have more precision in your teaching.
This is
Yep.
me. Okay.
Dr. DePinto.
All right. I'd like to take you through this activity. I'm going to sort of fast track it because of time, but I'd like you to take a look at this door. And what is your first impression looking at this door? Please respond in chat to everyone. I'll give you like 90 seconds. And this is definitely a fast track.
So we're getting quite a few responses, Dr. DePinto. Can you see that?
Yep, I'm looking. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide. All right. Okay. Dr. Odie, could you move the next slide? Yeah. So look at the door very carefully and look at the elements or the details of the visual images and suggest what you find intriguing. No specific criteria for intriguing. Take another 20 seconds here. And can we go to the next slide?
Okay.
Okay, so finally, when this door opens, what do you expect to see there, and what evidence do you have from the visual image that supports your claim of what's beyond the door?
Did I skip 3 for you, Vito?
Well, but that's okay. That's okay.
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 We'll just go right to 4. That's fine.
We just have so much to share.
Getting some very interesting responses to what's beyond the closed door. Cool.
Really interesting.
Right?
Yes. I'm fascinated just by the responses.
Let me talk very briefly about this activity. This is one activity, one segment of an activity that I've designed to teach our secondary teacher candidates in science of visual literacy skills. It is designed for most of you to fail. And we'll talk more about what we mean by failure. I will tell exactly what this image is. When my best friend, partner, and wife, Khaki, and I were in the early 90s in Paris and walking through the Latin Quarter, we happened to see this door. The door reminded us of a door in a Tom Baker Doctor Who episode. And it was actually a door to a storage facility.
Wow.
So what's behind the door? John?
So,
Dog?
yeah.
Bunch of boxes, furniture, anything you would find at public, that you would put in your storage locker at public storage, or anything else around that we have around.
Yeah. Wow is the what we've read right in the chat. Amazing.
So please continue.
Europe. I love it, Doug. Never mind. Okay.
Yes, Julia, we agree.
Okay, moving on to 7 types of failure. Okay, Dr. DePinto. Is this?
Can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. We've tried to formalize in some way the many categories of failure that we currently see in the literature across content disciplines, across grade levels. So each of us are going to speak to a number of them. So, for instance, this idea of unknown or no information meant one of the best times for our students to make a mistake, in other words, to give us some idea of what they may know or not know, or what misconceptions, would be this kind of failure. Then the other would be is incomplete information. And frequently our students are operating and making conclusions or claims where they don't have all the evidence. And then there's a classic misunderstanding. And one of the places this happens very frequently is in science, because the language we use in science is not, even though the words might be the same, their meaning is not necessarily the same that we have in everyday language. And for instance, I'll just give you one quick example. Theory in everyday language could mean any fanciful interpretation of anything. In science, a theory is fact based on evidence. And so that's a very different idea than what is commonly thought about as theories. Am I up here?
I
Sorry.
think this is Anne.
Yeah, so another type of failure, as Dr. Pinto was mentioning, also is misconceptions. And a misconception might be we're thinking about early childhood. So the students are hiding their eyes, and the misconception is they think that they can't be seen, right? So they're hiding their eyes, thinking no one can see them, right? But really, they can't see anyone else. So that's a piece right there. And then knowing something versus really understanding it deeply is another part of this form of failure also.
So in thinking about types of failure, why is this important? Well, once we started to think about the instructional implications of failure, that's when we really sat down to think about, the different kinds of failure. And as Dr. DePinto said, what the writings in the literature, but we've never really seen it broken down quite like this. And why is it important? Well, in setting your instructional goals, you need to know what kind of failure you're trying to propagate or design a playground or a playpen for. So failure for learning is something that you would see in your classrooms where you purposefully, as Dr. DePinto did, set your students up to fail in a safe environment and then reflect deeply on, well, why didn't it work? And that at the same time, you're developing students' metacognitive skills. And I'll go to chat in just a second. And the seventh type of failure is that we identified is in design iteration and ongoing improvement. So it's when you are designing a prototype and then testing it out and then making slight modifications.
Yeah, Doug had an interesting comment right there, Dr. Elcordy, about failure. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because I
That
think we know what students think about intelligence. We know what they think about competence, but we really don't know what they think about failure, right? So that's an interesting piece. Thanks, Doug. Sorry, Dr. Elcordy.
No, not at all. I'd love to go back to Doug's comment. I'm just looking at how we are in for time. So we will come back to that. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Dr. DePinto.
Yes. One of the, and again, I think looking at the chat and people's responses, this idea of how we can use failure basically as a formative assessment, and misconceptions in particular are very powerful. It not only allows us to see what students think, it allows us to see, by analyzing the misconception, it allows us to how they have arrived at that misconception.
That's right.
And one of the things we need to ask our students is when they make a claim, if we give them a scenario and we ask them to make a choice, rather than just pick, multiple guess, they need to give their reasons for their claim. In other words, their evidence. And that is even more revealing. And this idea of basically either a formal or an informal formative assessment using misconceptions, using the fact that misconceptions is a type of learning failure that leads to understanding and knowledge, is very powerful. I think all of us have experienced that at whatever level of students that we've been teaching, including our graduate level teacher candidates who have been wonderful over the last 3 decades and currently are too. Actually, several of them on right now.
Yes, wonderful. I just have something quickly to add about how I would look at this in my instruction as a learning scientist / learning technologist. I ask my students at the beginning of a course that I teach, Introduction to the Learning Sciences and Technology, I ask them what is learning. And I ask them to show that in a concept map with linking phrases between the nodes. So right away, one of the misconceptions that I look for is a reference to, learning is defined by, has different learning styles. And this is something that has been debunked in the literature as not having evidence to support it. So we wouldn't really say that students definitely have preferences in how they learn, but what has been debunked is the idea that there's evidence that shows that if you present the content in the format of that the student prefers, that they will do better. So I also, at the end of the course, I ask them to draw another concept map about what is learning. And I see a lot of the misconceptions cleared up, and their definition of what learning is and how it happens has expanded greatly.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention too, way back in the early 90s when we were all getting on the constructivist bandwagon, which was very good. My friend Sandy Turner and I, when we were exploring the impact of authoring in multimedia, and back then it was HyperCard, we postulated that rather than just being constructors of knowledge, that our students are also designers of knowledge. And and as you, based on what's going on now in learning sciences, as Dr. El-Khoury has mentioned, I think this designer of students as designers of knowledge is a very powerful idea that is goes beyond just constructing meaning.
I also think that's helpful because I think often we think failure is a step backwards. And when we're thinking of just the way that Dr. El-Khoury and Dr. DePinto explained that, it's not a step backwards, right? When you think of it kind of in a more global way, it's really a way to grow, for growth, and to get better. Sorry, Dr. El-Khoury.
Not at all. So here we're going to our Padlet and we're getting some ideas here. I'm going to pop the link for the Padlet right into the chat. And to add your ideas, just click here. So we'd love to hear what some of your thoughts are. So let me grab that link.
Yeah. The ones we are beginning to have are so interesting, right? It's a great conversation.
Okay, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll spend a couple of minutes looking here. Okay, Doug's got a great comment here.
It does.
What about the idea that the kids should feel a sense of success? That is really an important idea.
Yeah, and I would agree, but it's like, how do we define success?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we've done in the institution of school is success is defined by being right, and non-success or failure is defined by being wrong. And so one of the things that the three of us and many other classroom teachers are trying to do is transform our classrooms to look at failure not as being wrong or incorrect,
or as failing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is not being unsuccessful, it is part of the path of going to success. But that's a fundamental change in the culture of school.
That's right. That's right. In everything that we do in our classroom, right? How do we reiterate that? If we believe it ourselves, right? Because if we only think of failure as failing, everything in the classroom will be permeated by that idea, which will change it.
So one of the things that I do for my students is say, you're not going to get it right the first time. So, and also to frame the idea that of learning as an iterative process, and explain how learning works, that you're building upon prior knowledge, and sometimes that prior knowledge may contain misconceptions, gaps, and or just not be aware of things. So it's important for us to use formative assessment as instructors to find that information and help support them.
Mhm. As we change our mindsets, I just want to, I was in a first grade classroom one time where the teacher had a banner all around, a mistake is an invitation to try and try again. So everyone was mindful, right, of this transformation that was happening in the classroom around failure.
Yeah, and I may be getting ahead of our presentation, but one of the things that has been around in science education for almost as long as I've, well, for quite a number of decades, is the idea of the conceptual change model, where you're actually using the misconception as a way to move from the perceived failure because of the misconception to building a more scientific conception. And it is now being applied in the last decade across other content areas as well, I've seen. Yes, I did get ahead of myself.
So we're getting some great comments in the chat, and we really love these ideas. We're going to give you an opportunity to actually talk about them if you would like in just a few minutes. So here's just some of the ideas that okay. Yes, that's right. You're not learning if you're not making mistakes. There is no failure. Absolutely.
And one of the things I share, because I am a career changer, so I was a chemist for a couple of decades, and I tell my students, as a chemist, as an organic chemist, when I was trying to synthesize a particular compound, when something didn't work, it would eliminate whole possibility of kinds of things to do. So in other words, the failure actually helped me to focus on trying what could work.
And that was part of the process. The failure was anticipated. So one of my favorites is first attempt in learning is a fail. So we're going to pivot here and talk about lifelong play. Is this Dr. Kenneman?
So lifelong play, this is so interesting, right? Which we hopefully start in the early childhood world. And what a difference it makes. So what happens when you're failing during play, and the role of playing, tinkering, and imagining for learning, positive mindsets, and learning from failure. I think this is so important to include, right? Throughout our learning, not just nested in the early childhood world. And what we see, just as a vantage point, at least what I see from our early childhood educators, is you tend to you tend to teach as you were taught. And if you think of failing, and you can't fail, and you've made a mistake and you're so anxious, right? That it really colors everything that you're doing and teaching. But if you have this mindset, really the way, right, Dr. DePinto and Dr. Elkordy, of lifelong play throughout your learning journey, I think it changes everything around. My daughters attended a school where there were no grades till 7th grade. And just taking the grades away from, I'm anxious about the A, it really changed the way that they think about learning and the role of play. Because I think the idea was we're always playing, and bringing ourselves to the next learning level. The other thing that I want to talk about with lifelong play is also the idea of there's attention learning something new, right? So when we're playing and we're saying, okay, I'll try that, we know that there's that cognitive dissonance, if you will, and then students move to the next level kind of in a natural way. So that's just something to think about.
Thank you, Dr. Kinnaman. I see that there's some comments in the chat. I'll go to that in just a second. But so I just want to bring us back to those three main buckets of the science of learning or learning sciences, and how we can use this when we are thinking about designing instruction that propagates play. So first of all, learner variability. How are your learners different? What skill deficits might they have? What assets are they bringing to the learning process? For example, do they know how to play? The cognitive cognition and instruction, how learning happens, framing the mindset, the idea of playing through design and constant modification without the stress of failure, because we know from lots of brain research that stress interferes with attention and memory making, and therefore learning. And thinking in terms of learning, teaching as a design science. So really evaluating the results of your instructional design leading to propagate play. Now let's look at the chat.
We've got
a lot of ideas here.
Ideas, right? We can write a paper and a presentation just on those ideas. They're great.
Okay, Learning Pit. We'll have to check that out. That's something that we can add in the resources.
Yeah, Asra shared a great link, and agree with Julia.
Do you think that helping the students understand the types of mistake helps? I certainly think so, because if you reframe it, it's not a mistake. You're going to try and try again, and increasing students' metacognition, their understanding of their own learning and learning strategies, definitely understanding the process and the kind of mistakes would be helpful.
Yeah, and just Dr. Elcourt, I just want to pick up positive mindsets. It's also our verbiage that we use in our classroom. My student teachers often script teachers just for 10 minutes about what they're saying to just the young children, and when we say right or wrong, or even the way we might grimace when someone answers. I mean, so those pieces too, right? That positive mindset, how is it enacted in the classroom in order for everything else to happen?
Yeah, and go ahead.
Sorry.
That's okay. I was just thinking, and I know we're going to, one of us is going to address this in a little bit, but one of the things, being a performance artist, being a professional clown, among other things.
Professional clown, I didn't know that.
Ah, you didn't know that, yeah. For 25 years, I was the official clown of Northbrook. Anyways, but one of the things I have shared with my students is this idea of clowning, commedia dell'arte, this idea of imagining the possible to discover the actual. And this is not just in science, this is across the board. And the three of us have really embraced play as, and again, I'm being a little bit general here, but as pedagogy. And, playing to learn, well, learning to play and playing to learn at all ages, including graduate students.
So we're getting some really great resources in here. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
We will definitely add those. And Julia said that if babies don't overcome failure, they will never learn to walk. Well, that's really important because I was just reading something that said when babies fall, when they're trying to take their first steps, we praise the effort, not say, "Oh, you didn't make it."
That's right. That's
So,
right. Mhm.
lots of wonderful comments here, and we will go back to them. But just in the interest of time, because we want to have time for our discussions, thinking about, I think we touched upon this. Why do we stop playing?
And I think one of the things is this idea of you know, our early childhood programs are about learning to play. Okay, our experiences in whatever culture that we begin our lives in are about learning to play. But somewhere along the line,
That's
we
right.
stop playing, and playing is considered maybe frivolous or not
Time
necessarily
consuming, right? Wasting time.
right. And
Yeah.
what we are saying is that, and our experiences support that this idea of playing to learn is very powerful. And regardless of your age of students, if they have forgotten how to play to learn, they need to learn to play again. And and each of us have taken this at various levels and various purposes in our teacher prep courses, and as well as working with teachers and colleagues in the field. And this idea of a playground. I mean, traditionally, if we're going to go look for a playground, we're looking for the swings and the slides and the monkey bars or whatever we're calling them these days. And there they are, right? But it's like over the years, playgrounds have become far too safe. In other words, in our effort to prevent kids from getting seriously hurt, they never get hurt at all. You fall on those rubberized, surfaces, and it's like you just bounce back up. And there's a group in New York City that are redesigning playgrounds. And just for this very thing, playgrounds are a place like in walking where children have opportunities to make a mistake, like maybe trying to go up the slide, and they suffer a consequence, like maybe a little banged knee or something. All right. And this idea of making a playground more like a playpen, where we confine, and yes, there are always issues of safety. We don't want them to be totally unsafe and that kind of stuff, where somebody could get seriously hurt. But just think about the way playgrounds are now designed. And we don't and so we're saying that in our learning cultures, in our classrooms, we need to make, obviously safety is always an issue, but give our students opportunities during the play to make a poor decision, not necessarily a bad decision, and the consequences of which allow to move towards success.
I agree, and I think Asra's comment about Montessori is so true, right?
Mm-hmm.
That whole idea that there's two states you don't learn, anxiety and boredom. So like you're saying, if you're in that playpen all the time, you're anxious and bored. But if you create that, which we're all talking about right now, as designers, we create that environment, which we nest everything else is so important. So thank you. Thanks, Dr. Pinto, and thanks, Asra, and everyone for your wonderful comments.
So in thinking about designing playgrounds or structuring your learning activities for purposeful failure or student success, something that's important to remember is if you don't fail, you're not learning because you already knew it already. And if you don't fail, you're not being innovative. You're not really stretching yourself beyond and growing. Okay, so we've reached a point now where we wanted to have an activity. We've got lots of wonderful dialogue here. Yes, the idea that you don't learn in anxiety or boredom. Absolutely. That's cognition and uh, learning. Yes. So we're gonna open it up. Are we gonna still do the group activity, Dr. Kenneman and Dr. DePinto? Or should we just open it up because there's a lot of wonderful conversation?
Yeah, there's a lot of great conversations, right? We have to be mindful of our uh, time. Let's
Yeah,
see what
so
Dr. DePinto.
are we going to do the design studio or just allow people the opportunity to share their ideas?
At this point, we have like what, 10 minutes?
Yes,
And
correct.
I mean, the richness of reading the stuff in the chat, I thought I would go for, let's share some of this stuff verbally.
Yes, let's hear the voices. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, thank you. We'll change it around a little, right?
Yeah, we would like to hear your voices. So please, if you would like to share your idea or reiterate your comment in the chat that we may not have addressed, please take yourself off mute and talk to us.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. This is Alex.
Hi, Alex.
Dr.
Hi.
Vasilevsky, as some of you know me. The comment that I put in the chat, and I would love for you three to respond to that. Something that I hear as a teacher, as a parent a lot, is that, learning through play is not always visible, like right in the moment. So a lot of the times, like schools are worksheet driven because when you send a worksheet home, it creates this idea that your kid learned something in school. Whereas if they spent all day learning and playing, then the parent, has to wait, like, and you had said, like, your kid got no grades, right? So the parent has to wait or, until they see the teacher, until halfway through the year. So how do you address that in your classrooms and, with your students, this idea that, it's not as immediate or as, visible to the parents or even sometimes to the kids, right? Like when the kids are playing or when the kids are doing a worksheet, they may not see their learning as immediately.
So I think that goes, and that's such a great question, to creating, you know, the way that the school my daughters went to, everything was nested within the system, right? So within the play and what you're learning and how the teacher, in a way, is stepping back and is becoming that good observer of young children. I think when you look at these kinds of models, I don't know if anybody else thinks, you have to know a lot more about child development, about where each child is, knowing the child is almost like, we play and whatever, is almost paramount, right, to this whole design model. There's so many pieces that are really important to it, not so much that you just know the worksheet and the curriculum, but you're child driven, right? So I think it's a more complex process but more valuable, for the child. I think that's the shift. In some way, we become curriculum driven, right? And where is the learner, right? As we say in learning sciences, right, Dr. Elcordy, where is the learner nested within that bigger framework? It's much more richer experience at the end for the learner, right? When you put all these pieces together, there's a lot of pieces in different parts of it.
I think too that Alex said something about grading, and that it's something that I run into with teachers when we're looking at formative assessment practices and trying to get away from this idea that everything must be something we do for a grade. And even if the kids aren't motivated by that, in an accountability culture, teachers have to be able to justify what they've done. And so that idea of sending packets home is something tangible that we can affix a grade to, as opposed to simply noting that play took place today and I, in my professional capacity, noted learning. It was happening, and if you need a grade, check in the book, so I think that's interesting, how grading and accountability might impact a teacher's willingness to engage in play. to
Yeah,
learn.
and I think that's an important point because where the system that my daughters went, the teachers had to write rich narratives on the students for 4 times a year. So again, like you're saying, that idea of how do we kind of balance this all to explain to parents where your child is and where you're learning, because really, is it competition or is it about them learning on their own level? That's a hard, that's a disconnect for a lot of parents, right? Because they want their child to be taught as they were taught. So I think looking at it the way we're looking at it now can be really revolutionary, right? Because even in early childhood, kindergarten has become the new first grade, and it has not been beneficial for children, right? So again, there's a lot of different things here as we are really, in a way, wanting to change the system, which has not benefited, our learners as we even see them on a graduate level.
And Anne's
Speaking,
experience as a parent kind of mirror my experience. When I started at National, my appointment was to our then lab school, and we wrote narrative report cards, and they were several pages long. And fortunately, I never had to write more than 120 of them, but even that was a lot. And and so my introduction, and including in my previous Montessori experience, to the whole idea of how we give feedback to parents and also to students was in a non-grading tradition. Even though I come from, as a chemist, you can imagine, the grading structure and how that was used to promote going, from undergraduate and research to graduate and all those other levels. So I do have a bias. I will always identify my bias there, but I've seen the power of that both with parents and with my, former students who are now in their late 30s and 40s.
Yeah,
I would like to add that I think this idea of, designing a playground works
design.
for learning, works for any age. For example, with my graduate teacher learners, I'll make specific assignments required but not graded. So one example is a research design plan, and the teachers were feeling a little sensitive and unsure about it. So I graded it on a you did it or you didn't do it basis. So at that point, you shift and take away the stress. There's low or no consequences. You get the ideas from the students so that you can give them meaningful feedback, and it's a more productive exercise. It's really truly more formative assessment for their own growth. So this is wonderful conversation, and I'm going to let it continue. I'm going to pop out in a couple of minutes just to set up for the next session. But before I go, I would just like to point out that we have an evaluation form, and we would love for you to share your feedback and your thoughts. We'll also be sending this out later through email. I'd like to thank you very much for attending, and as the conversation continues, I'm going to hopefully I'm going to make someone else the host. Well, you're already the host. Okay. So again, I hope to see you in other sessions, and thank you so much.
Right.
So I'm going to leave. You guys continue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And as Dr. Elcordy said, this is just an important